This show, we've been bringing you the very latest developments in two separate and horrific murder cases that occurred within days of each other. On October 20th, Arkansas anchorwoman Ann Presley was brutally beaten in her home by an intruder. Her parents say she was also sexually assaulted. She died without ever regaining consciousness. 28-year-old Curtis Vance has been charged in this case. Then, just 4 days after Presley was attacked, 3 members of Oscar winner Jennifer Hudson's family were shot to death in Chicago. 27-year-old William Balfour, the estranged husband of Jennifer's sister, has just been charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. Both stories have been the subject of incredible media attention. But you've got to wonder, would the Hudson murders be in the spotlight if Jennifer Hudson weren't a big star? What if celebrity Jennifer was just an unknown African-American woman in Chicago? Would we be talking about it? Probably not. Would the Presley murder have gotten as much coverage had she not been a pretty white TV anchorwoman? Probably not. How much does celebrity and race determine coverage? How much does celebrity and race determine outrage? Here is my issue tonight. We as a society should be outraged by all murders, regardless of the race of the victim, regardless of the race of the killer, regardless of the social status of those involved. A victim is a victim. A murderer is a murderer. Both the Presley and the Hudson cases are horrific murders of innocent people who did not deserve to die. So let's be outraged. But let's be outraged for the right reasons, not because of the color of the victim's skin or the perpetrator's skin. America is entering a post-racial society, and we need to start taking a post-racial look at crime. Joining me now, Mark Sawyer, Associate Professor of Political Science at UCLA and Director of the Center for the Study of Race and Ethnicity, and Judge Jeanine Pirro, former DA and host of the Judge Jeanine Pirro Show, and Morris O'Kelly, author of the nationally syndicated online column, The Morris O'Kelly Report. Morris, your latest column focuses on these 2 murders and how race may have affected the coverage and outrage over each. Explain what you mean when you say there's a big elephant in the room.
Well, there's a fundamental misconception when we talk about these cases. You said that we are entering a post-racial America, when in fact, if we look at the election of Barack Obama, the elevation of Barack Obama as an individual does not fundamentally change how black people generally and black men specifically are viewed. There is a history in this country of a fear of the black man in terms of how black men and interracial crime is conceived. Now, if we look at the history, well, you can't talk about interracial crime and not also acknowledge the baggage that's attacked.
Well, let me ask you this. I just want to ask you, are you possibly projecting your own stereotyping onto this situation? Because in the entire Presley case, nobody, to my knowledge, has mentioned race whatsoever. Not the parents, nobody. So you're actually the one who's bringing this issue to the surface.
I don't think you can honestly have an intellectually honest conversation about Ann Presley and not acknowledge the history of this country. When you talk about Ann Presley, you have to also talk about Emmett Till. You have to talk about Susan Smith. You have to acknowledge the campaign against Harold Ford in Tennessee. All these things impact the discussion of race and the perception of black men in America.
Listen, I want to bring Mark Sawyer, Associate Professor of Political Science at UCLA. You are an expert in race. Do you feel that there is a racial component in terms of the discussion or the outrage surrounding this murder? I can tell you that I am outraged over the Presley murder, outraged that this woman's face was beaten in to the point where her bones were sticking out, that her mother had to find her that way. But it has nothing to do with the fact that the perpetrator of the alleged perpetrator is African American.
Well, Jane, any thinking person is always outraged by these cases. But one of the things that we found when we do studies is we see that when whites see coverage where there's a African-American criminal, they're more likely to support more punitive measures. Also, when they see crimes or murders and they didn't even see a suspect, we did a study at UCLA, 40% of them remembered seeing a black suspect. So they strongly connect. It's a nightmare for the African-American community, the way they connect African American men in crime together, even when the story doesn't have that connected into it.
Well, Janine Pirro, former district attorney and judge, in this case, tragically, this is the suspect, the person arrested in the murder of Ann Presley. What's your take on whether there is a racial component or not? Is this something that's being projected onto a story, or is it something that people just aren't talking about publicly?
I got to tell you, Jane, this is being projected. The truth is that the Presley case was in in the front of all the newspapers because she was an interesting woman who was on television, and everyone was wondering, was she killed by a competitor? Was she killed by a stalker? Who was she killed by? It was really a question of who done it. How does someone get killed in a situation like this? And no one knew it was an African American until 5 days after she died. So no one can assume that race had anything to do with it. And by the way, the whole premise of this, that race is relevant, is belied by the fact that you've got African American victims in the Hudson family, and you've got Ann Presley, who was a Caucasian. This is not about race. It has nothing to do with race. The Hudson case is about domestic violence, and Ann Presley is about a beautiful woman who was on television and who was killed, and everyone wanted to know who did it.
Let me add this. And by the way, a reminder, we are taking your calls at 1-877-JVM-SAYS. That's 1-877-586-7297. We want to know what you think about this entire issue. Presley's parents were on the Today Show yesterday. Listen to what her mother told Matt Lauer.
6 weeks ago this morning, I found my daughter beyond recognition, with every bone in her face broken, her nose broken, her jaw pulverized so badly that the bone had come out of it. I actually thought that her throat had possibly been cut, but that was possibly the first knockout punch. Her entire skull had numerous fractures from which she suffered a massive stroke.
Mark Sawyer, does the sheer brutality of this murder, combined with what the parents say was a sexual assault, suggest that this could be a hate crime?
I don't think so. I mean, there's no evidence of that. And these cases, these details, are just absolutely shocking. I mean, it's terrible. And as an African-American man, I always get upset. I mean, we see these crimes and we say, we hope the perpetrator wasn't black, because we understand that when these things happen, despite a lot of our success and the things that we do, a lot of people ascribe these kinds of crimes to the community in general, rather than thinking of them as bad individuals. I'm not responsible for this guy, and neither is anyone. So I don't disagree with what Jane said.
Janine, 10 seconds.
Yeah. Hate crimes are when a victim is targeted because of the color of their skin, their religion, their ethnicity. If you're saying she was targeted because she was white, then that's a hate crime. But if she was targeted because she was beautiful and because she was a reporter and because he knew her and was obsessed with her,
he didn't know her.
Different.
According to authorities, they have described this as a random robbery. And a lot of people in the community say, we just don't buy it. Now, the reason I raised the question is that there was such viciousness in the execution of this crime against an apparent stranger. Right. That is the definition of hate, if I've ever heard it. I think sometimes rape can be a hate crime. It's a crime against hate vis-a-vis gender.
Well, yes, and gender is a category in many states, but the fact that she was so brutally murdered speaks to a personal rage and a personal somewhat obsession with a woman like this. It's not just that, most murders are not as brutal as this was. It suggests that maybe there was something.
What is this man, and we have to take a break, but think about this question. What was this man so allegedly so angry about that he would perpetrate this on a stranger, knowing nothing about that person except their appearance? Stay right there. I will have much more on the tragic Hudson and Presley murders. Do you think race is playing a role in these cases, the outrage or the coverage? I will be back with your calls at 1-877-JVM-SAYS. That is 1-877-586-7297. It is time for you to sound off on race and crime in America. Back after the break.